So the starting point of principle of sustainable development is the word sustainable development. And this lady is very important. She was a Norwegian prime minister. And she was at the head of the Brundtland Commission. She is Miss Gro Harlem Brundtland. And this was the report of the Brundtland Commission, Our Common Future. And it came up, it was written between 1983 and 1986. Okay? This is very important. It is the first conference on the environment of the United Nations, the 72 Stockholm Conference. In a sense, at the end of the 60s and at the beginning of the 70s, many people were strongly environmentalists. There was a very strong awareness of environmental problems. Actually, there was the Vietnam War, then there was a lot of people against Vietnam War. There were big changes, especially in Europe. So the environmental problems came up very strongly. And then, as you know, we had many other United Nations conferences on the environment and development. The most famous was Stockholm Plus 20. That is this Rio conference, the Rio Air Summit, which was very important. Then we had Johannesburg, we had Rio Plus 30. So the United Nations is very active on environmental issues and sustainable development. And the Brundtland Commission, the official name was World Commission on Environment and Development, started to work in 1983. I will give you all the slides. You will have all the slides. Actually, I think they are already on the e-learning. And it was chaired, as I told, by Gro Harlem Brundtland. And United Nations had some concerns about the accelerating deterioration of the human environment and natural resources, and the consequences of that deterioration for economic and social development. And the UN General Assembly recognized about the global nature of the problems and the common interest of all nations to establish policies for sustainable development. So the first important comment is about the word environment. So the issue is not about environmentalism. The issue is about humans. Okay? So maybe I don't care at all about birds, about fishes. The focus here is human. The environment is important, maybe also per se, but the focus here are human beings and the common interest of all nations. And today, with the climate change problems, this is even more important. And as I told you, I would like you to read. I put some materials to read, and it's also interesting to read at least some pages of the report. And so in some instances, I will just come to the class and read together to you and let you read, in order you to stimulate to read. Because especially today, then we have very short tweets, there is really the danger of fake communication, in a sense that it's not fake, but it's just short. And if it is short, there is always something missing. Okay? And so it is always important to go back to the source and read what was originally told. And this is very strange, even in research. A couple of weeks ago, I saw a paper and a scientific article mentioning a paper by myself. And it was written, as Luzzati proved, then this and this and this. But I didn't remember to have said this. I never wrote that. And then I checked my paper. I say, perhaps I was wrong, or perhaps I just forgot to have told this. But actually, I never said what the other person reported about my paper. No? And probably she or he never read my paper, maybe read an abstract, or maybe read something else which was written by another one. So it's a real mess. So my advice is to go back. And this is particularly, we have here an evidence of that for the idea of sustainable development. And we can just ask to you, what is sustainable development? Because I'm sure that at least a few people here, or many people here, already knows what sustainable development is. What is a common definition of sustainable development that you know? So I would know just it is very important. So languages, I think to have a lot of people from different countries mixing up is very important for languages, because each language has some beautiful and better words for saying something. Yeah. For instance, French people, in this case, have a nice, very nice word for saying sustainable development. How do you say in French sustainable development? Développement durable. Durable. Okay. Durable. Which is more or less the same word. We have a similar word in English, long-lasting. Okay? And because sustainable, I mean, it's very vague term. Durable. Durable.
I'm Tunisian.
Okay, durable. Okay, it means long-lasting. Okay? Are you happy with that? Okay, now we will read the report. And you will discover that this is not the focus of the report. Why? Meeting the needs of today's generation. So another word very important is needs. The need. Efficiency. Yes, we will read together. Because usually when you read a paper or whatever, a book, you always find to meet the needs of the present and the future generation, this is long-lasting, and that's all. But in the report, there is much, much more. Yes, someone wanted to.
I was going to say that maybe it's connected with the experience of the previous generation, or maybe some mistakes or something.
Yes.
Just in order to keep it in mind and boost it, maybe reconstruct something
Yeah.
and make it better in the future.
Yes. Now we will look at what is written in the report together. Sustainable development is the development that meets the needs of present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. There is a very important word, which is needs. How many of you come from economics or has studied economics? Please stand your hands. Or some economics. Did you have done an economic class? What do we have? Do we have needs in economics, in mainstream economics? What do we have in economics?
Demand?
Pardon?
Demand?
Pardon? Demand. But where does the demand come from? From? Consumers. Do consumers have needs? No. We don't have needs in economics. But we have utility function. But behind utility function, what do we have? Preferences. I prefer something, and then we balance. So in economics, we have A is preferred to B. A bundle of goods is preferred to another bundle of goods. And the issue in economics is consumer sovereignty. So all preferences are acceptable and are equally important. Okay? For instance, and so we don't have, so the idea of needs is not anymore in economics. It is just preferences. I prefer diamonds to bread. Okay? I prefer to have, anyway, actually those are bundles of goods. But we don't have needs. All preferences have the same dignity. The consumer is sovereign. Actually, in the Brundtland report, we have the word needs, which is not in the mainstream of economics. And why we don't have needs in economics? Because of the idea of freedom. Perhaps I don't want to eat, but I would like to have some diamonds. And I prefer not to eat 1 week or to eat once a day for all my life and have a nice diamond. And this is freedom. Okay? And the idea is to defend the individual right to have her own preferences. I don't want anyone telling me what I have to do and what I have to consume. If I want to minimize, or maybe I want a beautiful car, and then I don't care about having a house. So I'm willing to sleep in the street, but I want a great, beautiful car. And I must be free of doing this kind of choice. And actually, it is difficult to define what is a need, because it is also a cultural issue, and it depends very much also on the level of wealth, or the general level of wealth. Okay? And so there is a bit of a dilemma. Can I define what a need is? And economists don't dare to define needs. But actually, life is not black and white. and very important scholar, Georgescu Regen. Let's my suggestion is to go and have a look to this guy, Georgescu. He was a Romanian. Georgescu Regen. And he was an economist. Then he was mainstream. Then he developed ideas which are rather far from the mainstream. And he was also very strong in philosophy of science. And he insisted a lot on the fact that, of course, in some cases we have concepts which are similar to mathematics. But in some other cases, we have dialectical concepts. That, for instance, what is democracy? We cannot have a mathematical definition of democracy. Okay? For many things. What does it mean? A tall person. We cannot say a tall person is a person higher than 1 meter and 75.
That depends.
It depends. Okay? So in this case, we have a fuzzy logic. So we can say that a person which is 175 is probably high, or probably belongs to but depends very much. And so we have mathematical concepts and dialectical concepts. So in this case, in some cases we have black and white. In some other case, we have a scale from black, gray, different other grays, and white. And of course, if you use this idea, we can define needs. Okay? Needs is not a mathematical concept. But at the same time, we can have I need to drink. If I don't drink at least, I don't know how much water or any other liquid, I will die. At the same time, we can also define needs according to the society. Okay? So, the idea that needs sometimes are in dispute doesn't involve that we cannot define needs. That needs don't exist because we are not able to define them precisely. Okay? And at the same time, needs, so having the idea of needs, do not involve restricting freedom. There are needs. I want to satisfy needs. And it's saying that a person needs 1 liter of liquid per day doesn't mean that to limit her freedom. If she doesn't want to drink and die, that's her business. Okay? So we don't have to mix up things. Of course, needs are difficult to define, but at the same time, at least socially, we can say what a need is. And culturally, of course, in Italy, for instance, eating pasta or pizza is a need. In Germany, it is not a need. Maybe it's a pleasure, but it's not a need. Okay, eating bread is a need in Italy, in some regions of Italy. And we can define that maybe in this region of Italy, having one small piece of bread is a need. And in Germany, maybe, or in Croatia, is having a piece of corn or whatever. So I think this is important no, essential needs. Essential needs of the world's poor. And of course, okay, this is one concept. And the other concept is the problem of meeting present and future needs, and that we have limits. Well, there are limitations. Okay? Thus, the goal of economic and social development must be defined in terms of sustainability in all countries. Developed and developing, market-oriented or centrally planned. Interpretation will vary, but must share certain general features and must flow from a consensus on the basic concept of sustainable development and on broad strategic framework for achieving it. And this is part, we are reading the report. Huh? Development, transformation of economy and society. Again, interdependency and mainstreaming sustainability into different fields and topics. Physical sustainability, durability, cannot be secured unless development policies pay attention to such consideration as changes in access to resources and in the distribution of costs and benefits. Okay? Even the narrow notion of physical sustainability implies concern for social equity between generation, as you have said, future generation, a concern that must logically be extended to equity within each generation. What is usually missing in the standard definition of sustainable development is this big focus that you have in the Brundtland report on intragenerational equity, on equity between people belonging to the same generation. Equity within each generation. This is usually, we don't usually talk about this in sustainable development. Yeah, we know that it is, but it is not stressed very much. Usually, the stress is on future generation. Now, I would suggest you, each of us, read the whiteboard. Huh? You have comments on that? I would ask you the reason of the need of intragenerational equity. As you see here again, we don't. Which is the type of ethics that we have here in mind? As you see, it's very instrumental. So the issue is, both. Huh? Of course, I care about the poor, just because I feel bad if some other is in need and so on. But even if I don't care at all about the poor, it is my self-interest to care about the poor. Because that is written here. That's a world in which poverty and inequality are endemic will always be prone to ecological or other crises. So even if I am greedy and I don't care at all about the poor, about birds, or about whatever, it is my self-interest that the basic needs, at least the basic needs, are satisfied. Because the issue is the wealth of the system. Okay? So, as you can see, you have both an ethical issue, the legitimate aspiration for improved quality of life, and this is an ethical point of view. Okay? But this other one, this in red, is not an ethical point of view, is not an ethical position, but it is an instrumental position. I want to satisfy the needs of the poor, even if I'm rich, because it is my self-interest to satisfy the needs of the poor. So you have always these two positions. One is ethical, and the other one is self-interest. And so you can understand also from these small things why our common future was so successful. Because it's a brilliant political document where each one can recognize and can like it. A person who is very much concerned about others, very much altruistic, is very much happy with the first sentence, with the yellow underlined sentence. No? And he will like a lot this sentence. These people have legitimate aspiration for improved quality of life. But even people who don't care very much about others are happy with the idea, or can understand the idea, that to eliminate poverty is good for everyone. Now we'll go to next paragraph. So please read it. Of course, here the issue is about, as we said, about limits, about living standards, about cultural definition of needs, and the importance of lifestyles, and so socially and culturally determined perceived needs. And we need to promote values that encourage consumption standards that are within the bounds of ecological limits. So we have here, again, limits. We have limits. And we can choose because we are embodied in a social context. And we need to have lifestyles which are consistent with those limits. And make all of us happy, because which all can reasonably aspire. Please read number 6. When I read this, I was rather surprised. And the reason is that it does not say that economic growth is needed. It only says that economic growth can help. Okay? Because it can be consistent with economic growth. Economic growth is needed where? In places where such needs are not being met. In Sweden, in Norway, we don't need economic growth. Okay? Economic growth is needed. I'm talking about necessity. Huh? Sweden doesn't need economic growth. Italy doesn't need economic growth. If we have economic growth, then we have the other sentence. we can have economic growth. We can provide it. Look how strong this document is, provided the content of growth reflects a broad principle of sustainability, and especially this one, which is very radical, that is, what do you read here? Nothing more. Non-exploitation of others, which is rather strong for being an official document from the United Nations. We need to stop exploitation of others. But growth by itself is not enough. High levels of productive activity and widespread poverty can coexist. You are probably aware of the work of several economists, and for instance, by Piketty. Sorry, just 1 second, the battery. This French economist, Piketty, wrote a lot of articles, paper studies, research, did a lot of research about growth and inequality, and emphasize that growth is benefiting only the richest. Even in the rich countries, only the top 5% of population is improving, and the other are not. And this, however, what is reported here, the Brundtland report, was written in the 80s, in the mid-80s. Okay? Hence, sustainable development requires a society meet human needs both by increasing productive potential and by ensuring equitable opportunities for all. So, now please read this one. Comments on that. What is about? It's about population, demographic change. An expansion in numbers. Numbers of what? People. Inhabitants. Okay, this is about population. Comments?
I think it underlines the fact that
Your reading is that what is that population can be a problem, a general problem. Okay, and your reading is this because you are much younger than me. Because my reading is completely different. Because then I will explain to you. Any other comments? What do you read in that? Yes.
maybe
All of you said something interesting, of course. In the 70s, especially at the beginning of at the end of the 60s and at the beginning of the 70s, there was, as I said before, a lot of discussion, and there was also a lot of concern about population, about the increase of population. They did a lot of estimates that the world in 2020 will be 50 billions of people and so on. And actually, there was a guy who wrote, very famous, who wrote a book whose name was The Population Bomb. And the idea was to promote policies against the growth of population, as if this would solve the problem. And also, we have to cut population. We have to stop population growth. And it was also rather strange that the people who were very strongly in favor of cutting population growth was also suggesting also very strong measures, even sterilization of women. Actually, sterilization of women is much, much more dangerous than the sterilization of men. Okay? So it was a bit strange and also a bit dangerous. We have to stop population, so we have to sterilize women. Of course, there were only academic provocation and so on. But nobody told we have to sterilize men, which is much, much less dangerous. Actually, it's not dangerous at all to sterilize men. And of course, this trend of proposal were, in a sense, very conservative and at the same time very simplistic. As if I stop population demographic growth, then all problems are solved. But actually, the few people consume more resources. Because for instance, in Italy, we don't have any population growth anymore, but yet we consume a lot of resources. And actually, this is very much connected with the IPAT approach. Perhaps some of you have heard about, which is I equal PAT. And Ehrlich, who was the author of Population Bomb, elaborated also this formula. I is like impact, pollution. Okay? The human impact is given by the product of these three variables. One is population. The other, this one, is affluence. That is, for instance, per capita income. Average affluence. And this other one is technology. That is the impact of technology. If the technology is clean or not, how dirty is the technology? The dirtier is the technology, the higher is the impact. So you can think of that like impact is equal population times GDP over population times, impact over GDP. This is the logic. You also have, for instance, for CO2, the Kaya identity, which is built in a similar way. So what is the idea here? If you look at the whiteboard, of course, you can, GDP goes out with GDP, population goes out with population, and then we have impact is equal impact. So the idea is here to have three kind of independent variables. One variable is about the size of the economy, the scale. How many people? So this is a scale. This one is the consumption per person. Affluence. The average income. This is about, what does it mean? Impact over GDP. It is, for instance, suppose CO2 emissions which are measured in tons, for instance, over GDP. For instance, euros. What does it mean? Tons over euros. It means how much CO2 per 1 euro of GDP. Of course, if my emission level is low, it means I am very much efficient. I don't produce a lot of CO2. I can have $1, €1 with few emissions. So the idea is so a kind of the inverse of efficiency. This T technology is the kind of inverse of efficiency. The less efficient I am, the higher is CO2 emission per GDP or pollutants per GDP. Okay? What is a problem in this approach is that we have done an assumption. That is that all variables are independent. Actually, this might not be true. Because so we have observed that population goes down, but GDP per capita goes up much more than the decrease of population. Of course, if we keep GDP per capita stable, if we don't have growth, of course, reduction of population is good news. Is good news. Okay? But if we have growth, a very strong growth in GDP per capita, and decrease in population, if we keep this constant, still we have a very strong impact. And actually, those two variables are very much linked. And actually, we have observed the demographic transition. If you look at the projection of population in the past, they are always wrong. And the reason is why usually those projections, those estimates, ignore somehow the demographic transition. We know that the countries with high income level, in an endogenous way, population starts, the growth of population is much lower than before. So actually, there is a link between affluence and population. So the richer we are, the lower is the growth of population. But the consumption of natural resources is much more higher than this offset the low growth of population. So it is always very much important not to exaggerate the importance of population again. And this is also included in this sentence. Okay, population is important, but it is not the problem. It is not the critical issue. Okay? And so it contains both ideas. The importance of population, but also the idea that we can manage the problem. Please read number 8. Again, what is the meaning of this sentence? Again, we can use IPAT. I equal PAT. What does it say in this sentence? That T is not enough. Again, it is useful. It is very important to act on technology, to develop cleaner technology. However, again, we have problems. In this case, the problem is, again, distribution. Large section of the population may be marginalized. So again, technological development can bring inequality. For instance, now we have a very strong increase of automation. There probably will be a labor crisis, a lot of unemployment. But who will be unemployed? Low skills labor force. High skilled labor force will gain from automation. Low skilled will lose. So you can interpret this in this perspective. There is also another issue which is not mentioned here, which is the so-called rebound effect, or Gibbon's paradox. Okay, so this Gibbon paradox is important because, again, it's a relationship between efficiency and size. Again, if we think in terms of IPAT, we can have that technology improve, but at the same time, the scale, take population, or the scale, the size of population increases. Okay, or maybe it increases more than proportionally the amount of resources that we consume because we are more efficient. And then we will talk about Gibbon's paradox next. Now you have to read point 9, please. So what is the issue here? Is a scale. Pollution has always been existed in human history. We have cases of pollution that goes back 1,000 of years. What is the why is pollution a problem today? The problem is that the impact is everywhere, almost everywhere. And this is a big difference as compared to the past. Until recently, such interventions were small in scale, their impact limited. We have a different world today, which is not the world of the past, because the human impacts are strong and everywhere, almost everywhere. And we are almost at the end. Again, this is rather interesting, because does it say that we will finish oil? Will we finish natural gas? Will we finish water? No, we won't. We won't finish oil. We won't finish natural gas. It will be much more costly to extract it, or maybe water will be polluted. There are now researches about plastic in water that we drink every day, microplastics. Every day we drink a lot of microplastics, and on the microplastics, pollutants accumulate on that. It's not just that we drink plastic, that pollutants are on plastics that we drink. And so the issue will not be a catastrophic lack of resources. The issue will be rising costs, diminishing returns, or if you want, lower quality of our resources. And of course, we need technology for this, but ultimate limits there are. Okay? So again, it stresses the limits. Okay, we can be very brilliant, very intelligent, we can have beautiful technological solution, and so on. But technology will not save us. Economic growth and development involve changes in the physical ecosystem. So please, this is what does it say? 11. 11 says actually two things. Renewable. Okay, first of all, we need to use carefully renewable resources. However, what it is stress the system-wide effects. I have a forest plantation, then I can exploit it in a sustainable. So I put the plants again, and I don't cut too much wood and so on. But at the same time, this forest is not an isolated system. It has interconnection. So we have system-wide effects. And actually, there is so the ecosystems in general provide life support. They don't only provide biomass or water, but in general they promote life support as it is written in the document. Now, since time is over, I will ask you to read the slides alone at home. Let's have a look. Okay, I put on the slides different points, and in the next lecture we will keep on commenting. So you will have to read it at home, please, so we can comment them very quickly. Now I will put them on the Moodle. So who will present next time? The sustainable